Listen, anybody feeding our babies goodness and doubling down on what we all know is that black people love their children, they love their family, the children love their grandmothers and their family members, and we black love is not celebrated enough. It's always black trauma and pain, especially in books, and I'm here for the joy. So was that the impetus for doing Kiana Loves Her Family?
Absolutely. And before I get into that, I want to say that your show brings a lot of joy to me and my husband. We are big fans. So
Uh-huh.
I'm so thrilled to be here.
All right,
But
I'll be listening on Friday, right? This is the Friday show. I know it is.
right, yeah.
Okay.
But that's absolutely the impetus for this book, as well as all of the other books that I do. One interesting fact about Kiana Loves Her Family is that this is the launch of a new series of books under that same title, Kiana Loves. So she'll talk about school, friendship, holidays, other themes. And it's kind of a spin-off of my first picture book, which is I Love My Hair, which is a
Yes.
classic picture book. It's been around for over 20 years.
Are you
I'm
kidding
dating
me? That book is
myself.
20 years. Hold
That
on.
book is
That is a
over 20 years old.
come on.
Yeah. So Kiana is the protagonist in I Love My Hair, and where we don't really
Wait
see
a
a whole
minute,
lot of her.
Natasha. Wait, I'm
Yeah.
just now putting two and two together. This book is
Yeah.
iconic, y'all. Everybody who has any children with the library, I Love My Hair is in it. It is in everybody's library. This book is more than 20. This is your book?
It's my book.
Wow. Okay.
1998.
You got into that space. Well, there was, I think, a glory period for black authors, even black children, because today it's so hard to get published unless you're a celebrity.
Right.
Children's books, poetry, if you don't have a household name, you can pretty much forget about it. So, are you able to do this now because of the success of I Love My Hair? Because that book is iconic.
I don't know, because that's an interesting question. So first off, I've been writing since I was a kid. So I was a shy kid. I'm still kind of a shy person, and writing has always been the way that I kind of navigated the world and brought my voice out into the world. So that's one thing. I'm always going to write, whether I publish or not. And I Love My Hair has been successful based on the readership. So it's a very grassroots success that oftentimes the publishing industry itself has not acknowledged. So it's hard to answer that question as to yes, because I Love My Hair is so popular, I'm able to publish, because the publishing industry and the mainstream has not really acknowledged that book to the extent that I feel they should have, based on the passionate readership that the book has had. Um,
Yes.
yeah.
So when you see Hair Love, when Oscars, when an Oscar and Vashti, who was amazing, has the book version, and it's like you're like, hey, wait a minute, church finger, not the hey, wait a minute, but I'm like in this mode right now of honoring the people that came before, and that requires something of us to go back and find out like who did the first book on this, who did the book before that. So you were writing since you were a little girl. Natasha Anastasia Tarpley is here. Her latest book is Kiana Loves Her Family, and it's going to kick off a series of Kiana Loves Her Friends, Kiana Loves School, etc. For you jumping into this space, who was your inspiration?
I always tell this story, and I'll never not tell this story, but it was my mom. So my mom for I Love My Hair was the inspiration, because when we were when I was getting my hair combed as a kid, I really didn't like it. I still don't like it. So my hair is always in braids, or I used to have dreads or whatever. But she made that time really fun. And we would pretend like there were people who were living in my hair. And we would go around, and as she combed my hair, we would just make up all of these stories. So she made that period of time not just bearable, but also a time when that storytelling mechanism started working in my brain, and helped me to start envisioning the world in new and creative ways. She also wrote stories about me and my sisters and my brother when we were little. about the things that we love to do, the questions that we had. So she was able to connect very early on a real life example of not only the writing process, but where stories came from, and that the things that we experienced were material for stories, and that we as Black children were also, worthy of being the star of our own story. So that is my first and primary inspiration.
I often talk about seeing Julia and little Corey as being kind of my, like, oh, we can be on TV. Okay.
Yeah.
For you reading books, I grew up with Judy Blume and Judith I was fresh. So I'm reading Flowers in the Attic and I'm reading Stephen King and I'm like, I'm 10, I'm reading all of this
Yeah.
stuff. Oh my God, and my mother's giving me money. She doesn't know what the hell I'm reading.
Right.
She's got for colored girls. My father has his Black Power books and I'm like, I'm
Hmm.
reading all of this, provocative stuff. For you as a little person, what was the book entree into this world for you?
Um, I always get asked this book by kids, like, "What's your favorite book?" What? And it's hard for me to identify one, because when I was a kid, unfortunately, the books that were written by Black authors weren't front and center. So our librarians, I went to a predominantly white school for elementary and high school, and so our librarians weren't necessarily recommending those books to us. They weren't being covered in the media. So my first books were like you, Judy Blume, Harriet the Spy, Little House on the Prairie. As problematic as that is now, it was a way to experience, books have always been a way to experience new worlds, new kind of adventures, except, we weren't in that. So now I'm like, wait a second, we have our own Little House stories. We have our own,
Right. Right.
whatever. So it wasn't until I was an adult that I really began to recognize what had happened to me as a child. I didn't know that I was yearning for that
Mhm.
until I got to be an older person, starting to think about writing books myself.
Well, I had a great teacher, Maxine Johnson, who made us watch Roots as an assignment in the fifth grade. And that sent me to the bookstore to buy the book. And I remember being
Yeah.
like, intimidated because it was this thick. It was
Yeah, it's
I was
huge.
like, can I read this book? I'm 10. And it was like 800 pages, but I
Yeah,
did. And I was so
right.
proud of myself. But that opened another world, as
Hmm.
well, where you see yourself, but it's a story of trauma, right?
Yeah,
And so for you, the joy, because this is what, this has to be the year of happy coming into
yes,
2023, because there's so much going on in the world. We got to be happy. And Kiana loves dot, 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 her family right now and everything else. The joy in literature for you as an author, why is that important?
I mean, it's so important because it helps. It's really the thing that draws you to books. I think when we are talking to and about Black children, we're so anchored in this narrative of reality, which is flawed in and of itself. So it's the trauma, it's the struggle, it's all of the things that none of us can ignore, or I don't want to ignore those things, but we have to give our children spaces, whether they're living in the most um, terrible environments, we have to give them spaces where they can enjoy something, where they can have a sense of joy and explore who they are from that standpoint. I think the world often gives our kids so many messages about who they are and who they aren't. And my books, I see them as a way to invite kids into their own imaginations and curiosity to kind of figure out who they are for themselves, what they like, what makes them laugh, what kinds of things are they interested in, beyond the messages that society is giving.
I love it. Kiana loves her family. Natasha Anastasia Tarpley, of course, and it is illustrated by Charnel Pinckney Barlow. As I mentioned at the top of the show, I'm looking into your office, and it looks like a Barnes and Noble's bookstore. Uh, it really does. I promise you. And I love to see. So, what's your favorite book behind you right now?
Oh Lord, don't do it. I'm gonna look. I actually don't have one. All of these are books that I'm going to for reference. I'm working on a new middle grade series about the supernatural. So and it's set in Chicago on the South Side where I live. So they're books on, African
It's a
American
chapter book. Chapter book.
middle grade, which is a chapter book, but for slightly older
Okay.
children.
All
So
right.
there's
Okay.
yeah, so
So
there's
would you
all
come
kinds of
back?
books on Black history,
Okay.
Black folklore, mythology, all kinds of stuff is back there.
Yeah.
Um, my book that I often go to, I do have one. It's called Good Woman by the poet Lucille Clifton. And she is just such an inspiration as far as the language. And she writes these little small poems usually, and they're just so full of meaning and beauty that I often refer to her for inspiration in my work. So I
I
found
see.
one.
All right. Yes,
Found one.
Natasha, you have to promise to come back
I certainly
with the
will.
mid age chapter book because that sounds intriguing. I love that genre.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of it.